Harsh Institute colleagues and I are just thrilled to once again co-host this event with Think Again at UVA. And this year, we're delighted to welcome the Heterodox Academy at UVA, Bridge UVA, the Civil Discourse Initiative, the Jefferson Literary and Debating Society, the Washington Society, and Charlottesville's English-Speaking Union as partners. Thank you so much for your partnership and your collaboration. We are also joined in partnership by UVA Engagement, and they are live streaming this event to University of Virginia students and alumni, friends, and family all over the world. I want to thank all of you who are watching via live stream for being here this evening as well. Before I go any further, I want to take a moment to say a very, very special thank you to Mary Kate Carey. Mary Kate is the director of Think Again at UVA, and she has been a very, very good friend and collaborator and partner to me since I arrived on grounds. And Mary Kate conceived of all of this outstanding event to which she has devoted so much time and so much care and attention since its very inception. So I'd like you to join me in thanking Mary Kate. I also want to thank our absolutely fantastic student finalists for participating in this year's competition. The ability to shape clear, persuasive arguments is absolutely critical to civic participation and, in turn, a healthy democracy. Your participation in this competition shows that you value engaged dialogue and are committed to strengthening your own civic habits. Thank you for reminding all of us that democracy isn't a given. It requires hard work, and indeed, it is worth it. So thank you. Today, UVA undergraduate and graduate finalists will deliver speeches responding to the prompt, "Tell the story of a hero of our American democracy." You'll hear about nationally recognized public figures and everyday Americans who understand, like all of you, that democracy is an action word. Now, when I think about my heroes, I think about my dad, who was in the military and then worked for the Department of the Army all of his career. I think about my mother, who was a public school educator, first a teacher and then an administrator in the public schools. I think of my former bosses, President Obama and Senator Kennedy, who I witnessed working hard with members of Congress and others with whom they didn't share every single point of view, but at the same time they were working towards common ground to improve the lives of our constituents and to shape policy that supported everyone. I think of the nearly 300 Karsh Student Dialogue Fellows who have come together this fall as they too engage across lines of difference. I think of all of you in this room and online taking time to come together to support thoughtful discourse in service of a more informed and engaged democracy. And finally, I think of all the public servants here at UVA and beyond doing the work of democracy day in and day out. I want you to join me in welcoming one of those public servants who's here today, Virginia Secretary of Education, Amy Guidara. Secretary Guidara oversees education from pre-K through post-secondary in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are beyond excited to partner with Secretary Guidara's office to expand this oratory competition, making it accessible to college students from across the Commonwealth as part of the celebration of America's 250th birthday in 2026. So that's something for you all also to look forward to. Secretary Guidara, Amy, I want to thank you for your friendship, and I want to tell you how grateful we are and how appreciative we are of your partnership, and invite you to come forward and to welcome all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melody, and it is such a delight to be here tonight. It is always a good day when I get to visit one of our wonderful colleges across Virginia, and especially wonderful to come here to this most special room and in this special, special place to be on grounds. And I want to thank both Mary Kate and Melody. You all have been the dynamic duo, and your organizations, both Karsh Institute and Think Again, have been incredible partners to this administration as we've really tried to celebrate all the things that are embodied in this room: free speech, diversity of thought, oratory, expression of thought that is going to have people leaving here tonight thinking about something differently because of these 8 wonderful speakers. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But I want to say thank you, because your leadership is extraordinary, and it changes not just lives of people on this campus, on grounds, let me correct myself, but also throughout the Commonwealth, because you're an inspiration to all of us. So thank you to you both. I am so excited about tonight. I had a chance to be with Mary Kate the day after, I think, the second one of these oratory contests, and then again last year, and she said, Amy, you have to come. You have to be there. It is the most inspiring night. So I have been counting the days for this moment to come, as I know many of you all are, especially if you're related to these 8 people sitting in the front row. And I am just ready to be inspired, because I know we're going to. I've heard that you all have written, and I know that you will deliver some inspiring words. And as Melody just said, this is something that we want to build on. What happens here at UVA is an inspiration for not just the rest of the Commonwealth, but the world. Because one of our goals, as Melody talked about, as we get ready for the semi-quincentennial, that's the new word that you can drop into your cocktail party conversations, also known as the 250th birthday of the United States and the signing of the Declaration of Independence, is that we are trying to do 3 things as we really launch this celebration. We're trying to celebrate democracy, we're trying to make history come alive, and we're trying to spark a civics renaissance. And that is what we're doing tonight with this oratory contest. We're asking people to think deeply about topics that are related to the founding of this country. And there's no better topic to think about than heroes of our American democracy. And I'll give you a sad data point before we get into all the good parts. In a recent poll, 59% of American adults said that they could not name a single hero in their lives today. And I think it is a statement about where we are as a country, and I don't want it to be where we are as a country. And that's why I'm here tonight, and good reason, is to be inspired by our generation of young people who will inspire us with what heroes have looked like in the past and have made this country exceptional, and about the heroes of today who will make sure that this democracy is stronger than ever and will continue to be strong and be a light for the rest of the world to learn from. So thank you for the inspiration that you will provide, and we cannot wait to have this model be brought across the Commonwealth. And as Melody shared, we will be announcing, coming up maybe tonight is the big announcement, that this oratory contest will be available to every single student in Virginia. Our 2-year colleges and our 4-year colleges will be able to take part in an oratory contest just as our wonderful UVA students are able to. And that we will have contests that will go throughout the year, and then we'll have a finalist, and then you can ask Peter Lee Hamilton, who I think is not here yet, but last year he was the winner for this and now a judge this year, and he got to do cool things like introduce the governor at our Free Speech Summit that Melody and Mary Kate were instrumental in helping to host here last year, but also to speak from the steps of the Capitol for our July 4th celebration this past year. So good things are coming to probably all, I know to all of you, but maybe to a couple of you in particular after tonight. So thank you for the inspiration, thank you for what you're doing, and we look forward to moving this idea and be inspired and having many, many more people participate. But I wish you all the best. I can't wait to hear from you. And it's now my delight and pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Mary Kate Carey, Professor Mary Kate Carey, who not only is the founder of this incredible oratory program, but also of so many wonderful things happening here on grounds. She is sparking conversations. She is bringing people together to have difficult discussions about how do we ensure that we get uncomfortable on our campuses in terms of listening to ideas that we may not have heard before or that we may not like, but that we get to be stronger and better people when we learn to deal with those hard topics. But also at her heart to make sure that this whole focus on speech writing, speaking, oratory, expression, which as Melody said is so critical to our democracy and our way of life, is made stronger in all of our students here at UVA. So Mary Kate, it is my delight to turn to you. Thank you for founding this wonderful oratory contest. Thank you for taking it into its 4th year, and thank you for taking it statewide. I can't wait to see what you do.
Good evening. Thank you, Secretary Gadara. Your vision of taking this oratory contest statewide next year has been a real joy in my life, and I can't wait for more students across our Commonwealth to stand up and speak about the values of our democracy and the great heroes that we have. I'd also like to thank Melody for your leadership and the whole Karsh Institute of Democracy for helping make tonight possible. It's been a terrific partnership, and I appreciate it. So welcome to the 4th Annual University of Virginia Student Oratory Contest. For those of you who are joining us in person here tonight in the Dome Room, thank you for coming out, especially on such a gorgeous night. I appreciate you're in here. And for those of us who are joining us on our first ever international live stream, welcome, and thank you to the UVA Club's global network for making this broadcast possible. So we are all now part of a great new tradition here at the University of Virginia, one that I hope will continue for many decades to come. As Secretary Gadara said, I'm Mary Kate Carey, and I'm a former White House speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush, and I'm an adjunct professor in the politics department where I co-teach Election 2024 with the great Jen Lawless, Professor Jen Lawless, who is here, my co-teacher of the big election class. And as you mentioned, I'm director of Think Again. Think Again, for those of you not familiar with it, is an initiative here on grounds that helps students thrive by promoting viewpoint diversity, freedom of expression, intellectual humility, and critical thinking. And we do that through student-facing programs like this one. I also cannot say thanks enough to Robin Eiler, to Kelly Johnson, and Sarah Hart, who are part of my Think Again team, as well as our team at Karsh, Nikki Kane, and Stephanie Abbott. And we wouldn't be here inside the Dome Room of the Rotunda if it wasn't for the steadfast support of Sherry Winston. And I'm looking to see if she's here, and I don't see her. But she, if I were to give a speech tonight about my hero of the American democracy, it would be Sherry Winston. So please join me in thanking everybody on our team. Our team has been working with our co-sponsoring organizations, to whom we are so grateful. The English-speaking Union of Charlottesville, I know there's many members here tonight, Heterodox Academy at UVA, Bridge UVA, the Civil Discourse Initiative, the Jefferson Literary and Debating Society, and the Washington Society. All of those last three are student-led organizations that have just started getting more and more involved in what we're trying to do. And the fact that this event was almost completely student-driven from its inception, and to see so many students here tonight cheering on the contestants says volumes about the number of students here on grounds who want to stand up for what they believe and who are hungry for great stories about our democracy. So I'd like to thank the many students who entered this year's competition. We had a record number of entries, and encourage those who didn't make it to the finals to please try again next year. In fact, I was at the semifinals, not as a judge, and I am very, very glad that I was not a judge, because I thought the competition was really stiff. So we've expanded our prize package so that 2 winners of tonight's competition will each win $1,000, an undergrad and a graduate student. The undergrad will have the opportunity to serve on next year's panel of judges, just as Peter Lee Hamilton is doing this year. Our judges tonight will be evaluating the speeches half on the caliber of their writing, half on the quality of the delivery. We will announce a winner this evening once the judges finish their deliberations shortly after the last contestant speaks. So to those of you who are watching online, please stay tuned, and we'll finish the evening with 2 winners. Contestants, thank you for taking the time to compete and tell your best stories. I'm here to tell you that this is not a hostile crowd. This is a very friendly crowd of good listeners, and we're all here to cheer you on. I also want to thank our semifinal judges, who are 3 of the best storytellers at UVA. Retired UVA legend Pat Lampkin, who we all love, UVA's Chief Creative Officer Matt Weber, and Oscar-winning filmmaker Professor Paul Wagner. As for tonight, we have a 5-judge panel. Most of them are world-class speechwriters who have written for former presidents and cabinet officers of the United States. We'll go from left to right. As I mentioned, last year's winner, Peter Lee Hamilton, was a JD MBA candidate in the class of 2024. So he's a recent grad, and he's now practicing law in Washington, D.C. Clark Judge, former speechwriter for President Ronald Reagan and Vice President George H.W. Bush. He's now head of the White House Writers Group. Next is Rob Noel in the middle, former speechwriter Senator Marco Rubio and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, now head of the Washington Writers Network. Paul Orszalak, former speechwriter to President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore, head of the West Wing Writers Group. Sarada Perry is former senior speechwriter to President Barack Obama and now head of Perry Communications. So thank you all to our judges for making the trip. I think Clark gets the prize for coming the furthest. He drove in from Michigan. So, yeah, thank you, Clark. So let's get started. Our 8 contestants will each give a 5-minute speech. We will go in alphabetical order, undergrads first. So our first in the undergraduate division is Valentina Mendoza Gonzalez, who is a 4th-year student, double majoring in computer science and anthropology. Okay, Valentina, take it away.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Think for a moment about what it means to dream. Dreams are more than blurry late-night reruns we half remember. They're this romantic refusal to accept the current limits of our own reality. Essentially, dreaming is a declaration of hope. For my parents, dreaming meant everything. Born and raised in Venezuela, they believed in democracy until one day they didn't. They voted year after year, convinced their voices would bring about change, that one day the system would right itself, but it didn't. When those in power 20 years ago declared they would stay until 2025, my parents faced a choice. They left everything behind, hopped on a plane with 2 little kids, bringing me here, to a place where they hoped their voices would bring about change. Heroes are clearly not born in easy moments. They're made by hardship, by hope, and by the belief that something better has to be possible. And it is. Now, here I am, standing here as the University of Virginia's first ever Latina Student Council president. And just a couple of days ago, I voted in my very first presidential election. My parents dream beyond the walls that were closing in around them, and they may never wear the label hero, but they are the sole reason, they are the only reason I can stand here today. My parents are my heroes, and this is their story, but this is not just my story. It's a shared story of millions who quietly, without fanfare, hold up the core of our democracy. It's the postal worker who sorts our impulsive Amazon orders and the election ballots. It's the healthcare worker who drives home fighting to stay awake. It's the teacher who not only teaches American history, but inspires her students to question it, to engage in it, to claim their place in it. These acts of courage, these small, powerful choices, these are the stories of our democracy. Heroes are flawed, hardworking people who choose hope when oftentimes the world tells them not to. They're the ones who say, I can't do everything, but I can do something, and then they do it. Democracy is not static. It's not a building or a monument or a statue. It's a living, breathing thing built by people who choose to care even when it's hard, and it thrives on the grit and the resilience of those who dare to dream. We need to redefine who we see as heroes. For far too long, we've waited for saviors in high places only to find that they aren't coming. If the last decade has taught us absolutely anything, it's that we cannot afford to wait for better leaders to come and save us. We are the leaders we've been waiting for. We, the people who care about our communities, who believe in something bigger than ourselves, who dream of a world that is just. This is our responsibility. And let me be clear, Democracy does not need perfection, it needs participation. And in a democracy, the courage to show up is a revolutionary act. Every time we choose to engage, every time we choose to vote, to advocate, to help a neighbor, democracy grows stronger. So I ask each of you today to look around your own lives and ask yourself, who are the heroes here? And more importantly, how can I become one? How can I choose to make democracy stronger in my daily choices, in my relationships, in my dreams? We are the social innovators. We are the freedom fighters. We are the dreamers, the builders, and the keepers of these stories. Democracy will never be kept alive through the hands of a few, but by the many heroes who demand it, defend it, and dream it into being every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. Next up, we have Arola Olawahimi, who is fourth year and a foreign affairs major. Arola?
Testing, testing. Okay, awesome. He liked cookies. That's why they called him Yummy. Robert Yummy Sandifer. Sweet-toothed, not the most shocking characteristic that an 11-year-old could possess. Gangbanger, however, was a little more unorthodox. Robert Yummy Sandifer, a little black boy from the Chi. Robert was no ordinary kid, though. You see, by the time he was 11, he had scored the cover of Time magazine, but he wasn't alive to see his debut. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. To truly understand the significance of Yummy's short life, we got to start at the beginning. His story was written before his first breath, predestination. Where Yummy came from, you were considered a senior citizen if you made it to 19. By the time he was born, his mother, Lorena, had been incarcerated many times, and his father was also in jail. At age 22 months, he took his first trip to Jackson Park Hospital for scratches and bruises. His mother didn't keep him for long after that. So they sent him to his grandmother, Janie Fields, but things didn't get much better. It wasn't long before he was in and out of foster care and shelters. For the last year and a half of his life, he averaged a felony a month. By age 8, school was insignificant. By 10, he had been arrested severally. Predestination. Yummy was well known in the neighborhood, though. Depending on who you asked, he could be as sweet as jelly or downright rotten. He liked cars, fast ones. He was good at driving for his age, and he would often carjack just to prove it. He also liked to hand out beatings. Big or small, it didn't matter. If you were in his way, you got out. Yummy liked to watch movies. He liked to bake with his friends. He liked animals and basketball. He would say his please and thank yous, and he was a member of the Black Disciples gang. This was Robert, and this was Yummy. He dared to dream and to desire despite his circumstances, and everyone who truly knew him could see the demons that he was battling. So when he killed 14-year-old Siobhan Dean in a drive-by gone wrong, the neighborhood didn't know how to feel. It didn't matter that it was an accident, a life was lost. Law enforcement searched for him. His grandmother tried to save him, but his fate was sealed. And he was dead 3 days after he killed Siobhan. The Black Disciples had to cover their tracks. And these were his fellow members. Yummy just couldn't save himself from himself. And so that's how he left, as a means to an end. You asked me to tell you the story of a hero of our American democracy, and I gave you a gangbanger. The thing is, he was so much more than that. You could say that he died as a liability, and while that might account for the cause, it does not account for the impact. Yummy wasn't a hero because he overcame his adversity, but because he succumbed to it, because he showed why democracy is a necessity, especially in communities like his. Intentionally or not, Robert Yummy Sandifer did his part. For how can a country be for the people and by the people if it does not know its people? By his sacrifice and for his people, Yummy made sure that America would know his people. He showed why Black voices need to be heard, especially where it matters. To me, democracy is a voice, a chance to be seen, not just by our governing body, but by each other. At his funeral, Black mothers dragged their sons to his coffin and pushed their faces into his body. Why? As a reminder. Not only did Yummy's death call attention to national systemic inequalities, inner city gang violence, and the faults of the juvenile justice system, but it was a symbol for his local community as well. On the national stage, he represented a demographic in desperate need of a voice. And on the local stage, he was served as a beacon of caution for all who came after him. In the democracy, the powers and the people, and only in a democracy could we have ever witnessed the power that Yummy possessed. Not because he was some catalyst for immense change, but because he brought awareness, assistance, and liberation to all the Yummies that could have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Arola. Our next contestant is Sydney Siebold, who is a fourth-year student majoring in history. Please welcome Sydney.
Have you ever been to Colonial Williamsburg? I've been thrice, which is probably obvious considering I just said the word thrice. Most recently, my mom and I spent fall break in Colonial Williamsburg to celebrate my birthday. When we arrived, she insisted we attend a talk by the Thomas Jefferson reenactor, to which I objected. During my time at UVA, I learned a great deal about Jefferson's dark history as a slave owner. My professors and fellow students taught me to hate founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson. He was a good writer, but we must reject him and his ideals from this university as a misogynistic slave owner, my first-year English writing professor told my class on a required historical tour. Any attempts I witnessed to put Jefferson on a pedestal garnered social media hate, social exclusion, and hard-to-shake labels like bigot and white supremacist. I came to believe he was extraordinarily average, an exclusive, wealthy white man who could offer nothing to this university or country today. But because my mom paid for the trip, I eventually agreed to go to the Jefferson talk. When we arrived, I was met by a young Thomas Jefferson, wig and all, speaking to an overflowing crowd of fellow historian nerds. The reenactor, I learned, was Kurt Smith, a brilliant actor who used strength and humor to bring Jefferson to life. After studying and embodying Jefferson for 8 years, he knew every answer to every question the audience members threw at him. From the Jefferson Bible to his 3-year revision of the Virginia state laws. He portrayed Jefferson as the man who legally outlawed the international slave trade, established religious freedom in Virginia, and in his call for publicly funded education, founded the University of Virginia. Speaking as Jefferson, he admitted that in choosing to write the Declaration of Independence, he committed high treason, punishable by death. High treason? Anti-slavery? I was floored. This was not the lukewarm Jefferson to which, after the last 4 years at this university, I'd grown accustomed. This was Jefferson the revolutionary. For the first time in 4 years, I remembered just how radical the Founding Fathers and their ideas were. Equality, justice, freedom, democracy, of course, I had heard them all before. I'd written numerous essays on the importance of democracy. But in the past, these ideals had not surprised me. I had not found them revolutionary. I had found them expectable, with the underlying assumption that they would always be there. You see, I had become complacent to the very foundations of democracy. My hero of American democracy is not Thomas Jefferson. It's Curt Smith, the colonial Williamsburg reenactor, who reignited the flame of self-governance for so many of us that early autumn day. The question of how to understand our relationship to Jefferson looms large at this university. How do we honor the radical ideals of this great thinker without celebrating the anti-democratic shortcomings? I believe the survival of our democracy, including UVA, does not depend on Thomas Jefferson. If it did, we would have been doomed almost 200 years ago when he died in 1826. No, it depends on the educators like Curt who dedicate their lives to keeping the spirit of Jefferson alive. Those who teach us about the workings and values of democracy, who inspire us to push the narrative forward. Why do any of us here even know what democracy or a republic mean? Because someone taught us what they mean. Why do we understand the Federalist Papers or the Bill of Rights? Because someone in our lives propelled us to. The civics teachers, the high school American history and debate teachers, the politics professors. These are the heroes of American democracy. They keep this experiment going by emboldening the next generation to not only expect democracy, but to actively take accountability for its survival. When we forget what our teachers and those who came before us taught us, we too become complacent. But a democracy cannot survive on complacency. So I invite you all to remember what the Curt Smiths in your lives taught you, because it's not only right, it's revolutionary. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney. Our final undergrad contestant is Jack Siegel, a fourth year who is majoring in political philosophy, policy, and law, as well as music performance, sorry. Please welcome Jack Siegel.
Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Okay, great. In the time that Walter Cronkite hosted the CBS Evening News, Americans had just 3 channels and 12 diagonal inches of television from which to view the world. At the end of his 30 minutes each evening, in which he reached out of that small space to deliver the world's news, he said, "And that's the way it is." And people believed him. What a strange proposition that is, that another generation could be divided by war, conflict, and contested elections, and yet not be divided on competing accounts of the truth. What a strange idea that one man could be called the most trusted man in America. But the man with that title isn't a hero, though, for doing something we consider impossible today. He earned his trust with principle and with sacrifice. Walter Cronkite knew the weight of war up close. In World War II, he had reported directly from the trenches, witnessing firsthand the dark realities of human conflict and sacrifice. In Germany, he flew high over the countryside in B-17 bombers as part of the first journalist to ever accompany manned flights. He knew the stakes firsthand, and he would later describe these journeys as part of a sacred duty to bring the war home to the American people. His years as a journalist, whether from political convention coverage to morning news, made him into a household name, an anchor in more ways than one. He didn't emote, he didn't flinch, and he didn't preach. He sat squarely behind his desk, reaching through America's television sets to calmly lay out the facts. It was only for the assassination of President Kennedy that he let show a small amount of emotion, reflecting the broken hearts of the American people. Even then, after taking off his glasses and nearly coming to tears, he said simply, "From Dallas, Texas, The Flash, apparently official, President Kennedy has died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time." When delivered by Walter Cronkite, even the gravest news could stand tall, objective, and firm, unmovable by human acts. And at the end of his news that night, he said, as always, "And that's the way it is." So it was no small thing when this steady, stoic journalist decided to deviate from his usual tone in 1968. By then, America was entrenched in the jungles of Vietnam, driven by its hope to spread democracy abroad once more. President Johnson and the military were convinced that despite the war's costs, it would soon end in victory. But after 100,000 Americans died with no end in sight, Walter Cronkite decided to enter the fray once more to find the truth himself. He came back with a heavy heart and a newfound resolve to do something that risked the trust that he had built for decades. On February 27, 1968, Walter Cronkite changed his tagline. He said instead, "It is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only way out will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as a people who lived up to their promise to defend democracy and did the best they could." And his words rang true. Here was a man who spoke only what he could substantiate, and he told Americans that their leaders' promises of victory were hollow. Rumor even says that President Nixon, after hearing the news, said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost America." And soon afterwards, he dropped out of the presidential race. It was a moment of reckoning for millions of Americans whose beliefs in patriotic hubris were challenged by one journalist's rare, brave commentary. Walter Cronkite, after building up decades of trust, staked his name on just one thing. And because he did, the world moved. He was America's witness, someone who absorbed the joy and pain of each moment and reflected it back on the American people. He's a hero, not because he staked everything to tell what he believed, but because he built up a tower so tall within himself that the winds of change could not knock him down. His legacy isn't just one of reporting. It carries the conviction that telling the truth is the greatest service a citizen can provide. At the end of the day, he said, "And that's the way it was." Thank you.
Okay, we will now begin our graduate division. First one up is Samuel Bedford, getting his master's in commerce and graduating this spring. Welcome, Samuel.
We have it in our power to begin the world over again. The birthing cry of American democracy, these words from Thomas Paine, tell not of the power of guns and sabers, but of the power of the mind, a power which Paine saw could only be unleashed once we had freed ourselves from the trap of superstition. For Paine, we were to take things as true only when we ourselves had decided that they were true, not because some other had told us so. Democracy, therefore, was to be lit by the flame of human inquiry, to justify itself in open debate, as only then could it free itself from the shackles of the old world. This commitment to free inquiry had made Paine a hero in the 1770s, but it was to prove his undoing in the 1790s, when he directed his polemical fire towards the Christian faith. For Paine, religion was a mere human invention, obscuring from us the truths of our own eyes and enslaving us to the connivances of others. Its true evil lying in that, and I quote, "It professes to believe in a man rather than God, in the words of another rather than the thoughts of one's own." Paine's religion saw him ostracized from Protestant America, and he died forlorn and friendless in 1809. But he was not to rest for long. A decade later, his decaying skeleton was snatched from its grave by English radical William Cobbett and transported back to England. Cobbett hoped that the repatriated bones might stir up democratic feeling amongst the English working classes, that they would become, in his own words, an object of pilgrimage. Cobbett was ridiculed as a bone juggler by the London press, and so humiliated, he decided to keep Paine in his attic until his own death in 1835, after which the bones seemed to vanish into thin air. By this time, a group of American freethinkers had established, rather strangely, a secularist church with Paine proclaimed as its patron saint, the real St. Thomas. Its devotees, driven by hagiographic awe, made it their holy mission to recover the lost relics of their hero. At their annual birthday celebration for Paine in 1894, one speaker made sure to mock the superstition that possesses religious minds, only to later unveil a new relic they had discovered, a fragment of Paine's grave. I need not spell out the irony here, though how exactly Paine's followers had come to this point is worth dwelling on. By revering Paine as a saint, they no longer had to defend their secularism on its own terms. Paine could do it for them. They had only to invoke a missing pile of bones to justify their creed, exactly like the old religions. And so, by treating Paine as their prophet, they ignored his calls for free inquiry and reverted to the very superstition he abhorred, taking as revelatory scripture words that he had intended as reasoned argument. Now, we may ridicule them, but might not similar be said of our democracy today? If I were to place each of you upon this pulpit and ask you to explain why we ought to have democracy in your own terms, could you? Or, after a few jumbled syllables, might you resort to vague appeals to the words of men like Paine or some other hero of your choosing? Might you allow such heroes to speak for you, as if prophets passing down some divine decree? You see, we might malign populists for preying on ignorance, theocrats for their fanaticism, but what does democracy have to offer instead, if all that we can provide in its defense are the words and deeds of other dead men? For Paine, the power to freely inquire about our world, to shape it accordingly, was not extinguished the moment the revolution had ended. No. We were to carry the spirit of democracy forwards, not be the cautious curators of its relics. We were not to take the founding fathers at their word, but to take their words further. And so, I put it to you, as Paine did nearly 250 years ago, that we have it in our power to begin the world over again. And so it falls to us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Next, we have Grant Spears, who is getting a master's in public policy and a law degree, graduating in 2028. Please welcome Grant.
On June 5th, 1944, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, Dwight D. Eisenhower, woke up on the south coast of England after only a few hours of sleep. With him were 5,000 ships, 11,000 planes, 50,000 vehicles, and 150,000 men, all awaiting his order. Unable to go back to sleep, Eisenhower scratched down an apology. It read, "If any blame or fault attaches to this attempt, it lies with me alone." Thankfully, he never had to give that apology. See, the next morning, he addressed his men, emphasizing the weight of this moment. He said, "Today, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed people of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world." See, Eisenhower knew then that what we now call D-Day would determine the course of World War II and secure the future of democracy in Europe, in America, and in the rest of the world. Eisenhower's military efforts abroad were a resounding success. Within 11 weeks of storming Normandy, Paris had been liberated. Eisenhower's leadership had proven him one of the most important American figures in eliminating the Axis threat to our democracy. After the war, Eisenhower ran for president, where he won a sweeping victory. His first task was once again to fight fascism, this time in Korea. As ground zero for a larger global conflict on democracy, President-elect Eisenhower visited the Korean war front. He met with troops, commanders, South Korean leaders alike, with a message of encouragement. And within 7 months of the start of his first term, Eisenhower signed an armistice, ending active conflict in the region. The Korean War would be an example of Eisenhower's tempered strategy in the growing Cold War. His efforts to ease tensions and provide stability are likely the reason we get to call our conflict with the Soviet Union a Cold War and not a nuclear one. After addressing the threats to democracy abroad, Eisenhower turned his attentions to the growing divisions at home. See, the president was faced with a deeply polarized nation, once again addressing the realities of racial discrimination. As a result, within his first year, Eisenhower completed the process of desegregating our armed forces, begun by President Truman before. From there, Eisenhower sought change at the seat of American democracy itself, Washington, D.C. He appointed civil rights activists to the Department of Justice and the Supreme Court, paving the way for the landmark Brown v. Board decision. This commitment was tested. In 1957, when 9 black students were barred entry from Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, Eisenhower responded. He sent federal troops to enforce the rule of law and ensure the safe passage of these students. Eisenhower's final stamp on the history of American civil rights was the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the first civil rights legislation in over 80 years, representing a nation and its democracy on the verge of radical change. In the last days of his second term, Eisenhower made one final effort to safeguard the nation. In his farewell address, he warned of a looming, unseen threat to our democracy: the rise of the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower cautioned that the growing partnership between the military and private industries could lead to dangerously misplaced power. He wrote, "We must never let this combination endanger our liberties or our democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted." From a general, this warning was unexpected, yet courageous. It meant challenging the very institutions he once commanded in order to protect the greater American people. Eisenhower's final warning reflected his unwavering dedication to preserving this nation's democracy, not only on the battlefield, but in the corridors of power. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Next, please welcome Kamau Walker, who is getting Masters of Fine Arts in Poetry in 2026. Kamau?
Didn't expect the mic to pick that up. Good evening. I love America more than any country in this world, and it is for this reason that I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. These are the words of James Baldwin, an activist, writer, revolutionary, and my champion of democracy. Baldwin was born in Harlem, New York in the summer of 1924. And though he is most well known for works such as Giovanni's Room or The Fire Next Time, to name a couple, I want to talk about the core philosophy of Baldwin's work. That is, I want to talk about Baldwin's fundamental belief that the only way to create worthy change within this world, within this country, and within the people around us is with and through love. Love is a heavy word in the English language. We place a lot of expectations on love as a concept. I love my fiance, I love my best friend, I love my Uncle Rudy, I love St. Louis. We understand these loves to be different in some ways, but simultaneously, we recognize they all share an underlying similarity. In essence, all love is founded on a profound care for and investment in the well-being of another. To Baldwin, the only thing we truly have in this life is each other. Professing love has never been a popular movement, and no one really has ever wanted to be free. The world is held together by the love and passion of a very few people. See, to James Baldwin, love was not a privilege, nor was it a circumstance we occasionally found ourselves within. No, for Baldwin, love was a responsibility. Having grown up as a black boy in Harlem in the 1920s and 30s, much of Baldwin's work contends with the realization that the color of his skin meant the country he pledged allegiance to every morning had not pledged allegiance to him. Such a realization can be shattering, and it can leave one incredibly sorrowful, bitter, and angry. I am not here to say that Baldwin never experienced any of those emotions. He himself would tell you that he experienced a great deal of them. What I am saying is that Baldwin still chose to love this country, and that he spent his whole life in service of that love. It is true to the near point of cliche to say that our country is divided. Political ideologies have shifted from philosophical disagreements towards an us versus them mentality. Rather than our compatriots, those differing in thought risk becoming the enemy. But ultimately, we are meant to work together to build a country that is better, despite varying perspectives on what better may take the form of. Aside from love, the core assertion of Baldwin's work was that we live in a state of irreality, one in which we are hesitant, if not terrified, to look in the mirror and recognize ourselves for who we are rather than for what we pretend to be. But we cannot love another without knowing ourselves. And similarly, we cannot profess to love another unless we are willing to help show them who they are. So when Baldwin made the decision to love this country, he made the decision to criticize her perpetually, such that America could look at her own conditions and change them. These actions were not done merely to improve the materiality of Baldwin's world. These acts of love were as much about improving this country for Baldwin and those he deemed close as it was about improving the country for those who may have wronged him, or for those he may have never met, but that he knew suffered just the same. Because Baldwin understood that to proclaim love to be our avenue towards freedom, that love must be absolute and that love must be all-encompassing. For if any of us are in chains, then all of us are, even the ones we believe shackled our wrists. This, to me, is the spirit of American democracy. It is the realization that, as Baldwin writes, the moment we let go of each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. Baldwin taught us to never let go of our countrymen, and to ask that they never let go of us either, such that together we may still find that light. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamau. Next is Heidi Zimick, who is getting her PhD in history. Heidi?
Thank you, Professor Carey. In 1776, while staying in Philadelphia, Thomas Jefferson drafted the American Declaration of Independence. In this document, he set out the foundational ideals that would shape the American experiment that we are still living to this day. He wrote that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In writing these words, Thomas Jefferson inscribed the values that shape this country even now. Ideals of freedom, liberty, and equality. But Thomas Jefferson is not the subject of my speech today. Thomas Jefferson had a paradoxical relationship with the ideals that he himself inscribed in that Declaration of Independence. Over the course of his lifetime, he enslaved over 600 people, including some of his own offspring. At the time of his death, he would free only 5 of these people, one of whom was named Joseph Fawcett. Joseph Fawcett had a family, a wife named Edith, and 8 children. While Joseph was freed in Jefferson's will, his wife and his children were not. They would be auctioned on the lawn in front of Monticello, each sold to the highest bidder. At that auction, Joseph Fawcett was able to, with the help of his brother-in-law, purchase and free his wife and his 2 youngest children. His 6 other children were on their own to find freedom. One of these children was named Peter. Peter Fawcett was 11 years old when he was separated from his parents and his siblings, bought by a man named Colonel John Jones. Jones initially agreed to sell Peter to his father when Joseph raised the funds. However, when that time came, Jones refused to carry through on his promise. While enslaved by Jones, Peter continually fought for his own freedom and for the freedom of others. He learned how to read and how to write. He wrote manumission slips for enslaved people to help them emancipate themselves, including his own sister. When interviewed towards the end of his life, he said that he had resolved to get free or die in the attempt. Peter Fawcett attempted to emancipate himself twice while owned by Colonel John Jones. Both attempts were unsuccessful. When he was freed, it was again by the auction block. He was purchased by family friends, and he was freed by them. It had at this point been over 2 decades since he had last seen his parents and siblings. After gaining his freedom, Peter Fawcett went north to a town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, where his family had gathered. He there became a Baptist minister. He started the First Baptist Church in Cumminsville, Ohio, and is still considered a father of the Black Baptist community there. He also became a conductor on the Underground Railroad with his wife, Sarah, using his own tenuous freedom to help others gain access to the fundamental human rights that Thomas Jefferson wrote about in the Declaration of American Independence: life, liberty, happiness. Peter Fawcett's descendants would go on to be involved in the founding of the NAACP, as well as the civil rights movement of the 1960s. In this one family, we see generations of leading the continued fight for the ideals that the United States of America were founded on: liberty, equality, and democracy. The United States of America has a complex relationship with the past. Our foundational ideals seem so transparently at odds with the practice of chattel slavery on which so much of this country was built. Even as the past may seem confusing, dark, and often painful, from these conditions rise individuals who found within themselves the resilience to continue to fight for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. Even as the future may seem uncertain, perhaps we can draw hope from these figures: Joseph, Peter, and Sarah Fawcett. I will end as I began, with a quote written by Thomas Jefferson. In a letter to John Adams towards the end of his life, he wrote, "I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past. So good night. I will dream on." Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. So now you guys know what a speechwriter's idea of a good time looks like. Do you guys agree with me? That was a good time. And you can also see why I've been saying for the last week that I am so glad I was not a judge tonight, because I think you have a very difficult job ahead of you. So we're going to give the judges about 10 minutes or so to deliberate. I hope our friends on live stream will stay tuned in, and we will be right back. So feel free to stretch or move around, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Okay, before we get to who our winners are, I've neglected earlier to thank our 2 alternates who, in case any of our 8 contestants got abducted by aliens on their way here, we had two students ready to go with their speeches ready to go, dressed and ready. And in a good way, I guess nobody got abducted by aliens, but that is, so the first one is Yasra Samguli, 3rd year political philosophy, policy, and law. Yasra. And Emily Spradley, 3rd year systems engineering. So thank you both for being ready, willing, and able. We've had a few requests for the written version of the speeches, and we decided not to just post the 8 finalists and the 2 alternates, but all of the semifinalists. There's 20 of them. It's on the Think Again website, and Think Again at, you just Google it, Think Again UVA, and rather than reading you the whole URL. And we will also, within the next day or so, we'll have videos of tonight and the much needed highlights reel that you can share with family and friends. And then the last thing I would say is, if you would like to support more events like this, there's cards in the back on the table as you go out with a QR code. This is the Fund for Free Expression at UVA, and that's what underwrites a lot of Think Again's activities. The Fund for Free Expression just got a very generous matching grant from the Smith-Vickers Family Foundation. So between now and the end of the year, all donations will be doubled. So please consider celebrating events like this and supporting us in the future. And I think what we're going to do is have the appointed spokesman for the judges, Peter Lee Hamilton, come up and make a few observations first, and then we'll announce the winners.
We're standing between you and the rest of your evening, so we'll keep this very, very brief. What is a great speech? When you ask 4 of the best speechwriters that have ever lived that question, It's actually a pretty simple answer. A great speech is a story, and it is fundamentally an argument. It's not just passion, it's a point of view. And its purpose is to persuade, not just to perform. When we looked at the speeches that were delivered tonight, we noted that we'd been given their writings in advance, and we were very, very impressed. And what was even more incredible was that every speech's delivery made that speech better. So a round of applause again to all the finalists for the great work that they did. And to add one comment from a washed-up public speaker, in an age where everything we do is boiled down into 20-second TikToks and brain rot on Instagram, it is incredibly powerful to see that long-form speech and pauses still exist. Great job, everybody.
So good. So we have two winners. Everybody, all 8 finalists will have Jefferson Cups we have waiting for you backstage. But first, our undergrad winner, congratulations to Sydney Siebold. Yep, come on up. Yep. Congratulations. And then we'll have both of you come up. Yeah, why don't you stay? And our graduate winner is Kamal Walker. Congratulations. Okay, so I think they want to get a picture with you guys. You want to them? Oh, I should go in? Thank you. Okay, and then if you guys okay, thank you to everyone involved tonight. Thanks for all your hard work. But why don't all of our finalists come on up, and we'll do a picture up here, and then people can congratulate you. And sure, whatever you think. Yeah, I think so. Okay, we've got. Okay, we're gonna hand out. Hey, you guys want Jefferson Cups? Should we put them in the picture?